learning that real history, like
Yeah.
give me, like find, like really tell me who I am, really tell me who my leaders are. We would hear about Dr. King and Harriet Tubman and then Oprah Winfrey, and Michael Jackson. Like that's who we would hear about, but they would talk to us about people we had never heard of. And that's what I needed.
Born out of the darkness of slavery, historically black colleges and universities, or HBCUs, have shaped America in a way that often goes unacknowledged or underappreciated. But these institutions are as American as the cruelty and greed that birthed them. And now, for the first time in our lifetimes, more than just a select few of black political leaders are gaining prominence on the national stage. Many of these rising stars attended HBCUs, signaling what could be a shift in the types of black leaders shaping our political discourse. Hi, I'm Shaniqua McClendon, Political Director at Crooked Media. I spoke with Congresswoman Alma Adams, Congresswoman Cori Bush, and Congressman James Clyburn, who currently serves as the House Majority Whip, to ask them about how their experiences at HBCUs affected their outlook and ultimately impacted their careers. Here's what they had to say.
Black people were looking at education as a pathway to lift themselves up from slavery. Many of our schools were created in churches, and many of them are still connected with churches today. They were really created out of a need to make sure that if you're Black like me, you would have an opportunity to go to college if you so desired.
The history of this nation is one rooted in the exclusion and segregation of Black people at a time when Black people weren't allowed at predominantly white institutions. HBCUs came about to provide a pathway to higher education for the Black community. It's an elite role that they continue to play in our communities in terms of the exclusivity and the selectivity of some colleges and universities, especially at a time when student debt is making college unaffordable.
Could you just share briefly how you think attending an HBCU shaped your perspective of the world and how it impacts how you approach your job now, but just being a public servant throughout your career?
Not only did I meet people there who could help me lay the foundation for a political career, but I met my soulmate there. My wife was on that campus the day that we were arrested for protesting conditions that one would call segregated circumstances, and we met in jail. It was walking back to the campus after being bailed out of jail that day that I had my first conversation with her after having just met her. And it was that conversation that formed the basis upon which I still provide public service today.
I'm unapologetically me. And that was taught to me at home. My parents taught that to me. And then when I went to high school, my high school taught that to me. And it was reinforced, at Harris Stowe, the exact same thing. And so now, so that's just a part of who I am, is to be unapologetic, to be unbossed, and to show the world exactly who Cori is. And that's what I give to others. I say that same thing to others. Be who you are. Love whatever, that thing that makes you unique, push that forward. You don't have to hide. You don't have to hide that. Oftentimes we feel like we have to code switch, but I bring forward my AAVE. I don't hide my African American vernacular English. I bring that to the forefront. Everybody else has to adjust.
I wondered, were you ever discouraged from attending an HBCU, or were you encouraged to do so? And is there something that we can do within our high schools or schools in general so that more Black students understand that it's an option and a really good option?
I was discouraged from going to college. Go and get a trade, as people would say, And I think much of that had to do with the lack of expectations for kids who looked like me, and which is why. But I've got to tell you, I had a strong mother who didn't get an education. She finished the 10th grade. She did not go to an HBCU or any CU for that matter, was not able to go to college. But in my community, where we really took interest in all of the folks in the community, whether they were related to you or not, took an interest in young people like me and said, you know, girl, you're going to college. Now, my mother said that to me so much, and I just couldn't understand how that was going to be possible because, you know, I grew up in the ghetto. We didn't have money. And, but, you know, my mother had a lot of faith. And we had a big extended family, as well as some of her brothers and sisters who helped me. So I wasn't encouraged. So they didn't talk about PBIs or anything like that. Didn't even talk about college for me. I'm talking about in my high school. Mm-hmm. But it was my family and people in my community who said, you know, you really need to go to college. This is how Black folks get ahead, you know. And my mother knew it. She scrubbed floors. She scrubbed white folks' floors every day because she knew and she and understood how important education would be in my life. And clearly it has been my pathways.
I was maybe 7 or 8 is the first time that I could remember my father. He would sit us down at the dinner table and he would talk to us about who we would become. Mm-hmm. And he would always say that I was going to be Attorney General. And I would go to Howard University. And I mean, he just will always talk about Howard University. This is where you're going to go. And, you know, so, you know, he had me looking up and understanding what HBCUs were back when I was a child. And so it was just always in my head, like that's just where you're going to go, to a HBCU. I didn't understand why at the time. But when I got a little older, I had an experience where so I went to an all Black K through 8 school. And then when I went to high school, I entered a predominantly white high school. And the way that I was treated at that school, it was something that I had never experienced before. I felt so much hatred and separation at that school. I was treated differently because I was Black and because I was said to be, this is what I was told, that I was the #1 entering freshman in the class. And so people didn't like that I was the #1 entering freshman. And so I was harassed. I was discriminated against. I was, you know, there was a lot of intimidation. Mm-hmm. And so much so to where at 14 years old, I decided, like, I don't have to be here. You know, it was really affecting my grades, my GPA. I had a great GPA walking in the door, but my GPA was starting to fall. My grades were something I had never seen before. So when I transferred out of that school and went to an all Black high school, and that is where, you know, I was back in that place where I was being nurtured and I was free to be myself. Going to a HBCU was the necessary step for me, just making sure that I had that freedom to just be me and I didn't have the burden to fight racism while I'm trying to learn.
HBCUs play a very critical role, and I think I can best explain that by sharing the last conversation I had with Ron McNair. Ron McNair, a very successful astronaut who lost his life, 30 years ago in the explosion of the Challenger. Ron had been in space before. He had a PhD in physics from MIT. But Ron came by to visit with me just before he went on that fatal trip. Ron told me on that occasion that people always introduced him as this successful astronaut, Black astronaut with a PhD from MIT. But he said to me that his success was because of those 4 years he spent at North Carolina A&T. And when he left little Lake City, South Carolina, and went to North Carolina A&T, is when he found professors who, because of their backgrounds, their experiences, understood how to bring him along and make him into what he needed to be.
I'm wondering if while you were in college, you started to get a more realistic and truthful understanding of American history. Just kind of what those differences were between what you saw and learned in high school and what you understood once you got to college and then went into the world.
The first course that I took in African American studies was at my HBCU. So I came to college while I had a real sense of pride about who I was, simply because that was instilled in me and my family. But it wasn't something that I learned in school. And so I didn't learn much about African Americans or who I was or about my history. And like I said, I was in college before I really understood it. I had professors who emphasized the awareness of self-appreciation, of acceptance, of cultural pride. And many of my college professors looked like me. In high school, most of them didn't look like me. And so that in and of itself gave me a sense of pride too, because, you know, you can be what you see. And so it was when I arrived on the campus of North Carolina A&T that I was just so overwhelmed, really, to see so many people who look like me.
Yeah.
But that school spirit, that cultural pride, the leadership opportunities that I was able to avail myself to, all those things, I think really helped me.
That was a big part of it too. Learning that real history, like give me, like find, like really tell me who I am, really tell me who my leaders are. We would hear about Dr. King and Harriet Tubman and then Oprah Winfrey, you know, and Michael Jackson. Like that's who we would hear about, but they would talk to us about people we had never heard of. And that's what I needed.
What are just some of your most memorable moments, whether they're good or bad, lessons learned, challenges? We'd just love to hear what those are.
Listen, I just, again, like I was just overwhelmed to be on the campus, to be on a college campus when so many people when I was going to high school said, oh, you know, that's not for you. And just to be there and to also know that we didn't have the money, but yet I got there, right? And, first generation and that kind of thing. But the fact that, you know, again, like I said, I was just kind of overwhelmed at the environment. I was not just one of few Black students like I was in my high school. I was one of many.
When I got to college, I had some significant experiences, but one stands out that I talk about a lot. It happened my sophomore year when I had a professor who I used to love battling around. He was from the little town of Wilson, North Carolina, and I used to argue with him a lot. And so one day, in the middle of one of those arguments, he stopped the class, and he looked at me and he said, "Now, young man, let me tell you something. You will never be any more, nor will you be any less than what your experiences allow you to be." I never, ever forgot that. And that's why I named my memoirs, Blessed Experiences. And I said in the introduction to that book that all of my experiences have not been pleasant, but I've considered all of them to be blessings. And the blessings of those experiences are what got me where I am today.
My first impression upon arriving to campus for the first time was, it just reminded me of high school. You know, it reminded me of high school in a way, you know, but I felt grown. And then also, I just felt like I could be free. I felt like this is a different world moment. Like on the television show, they always, you know, were, you know, showing their, the pride for their school, you know, and they had all of these relationships where the one thing that they didn't worry about was racism, as it, you know, where it was, you know, this oppression, this living under this oppression that comes from another whole group of people where you are the minority. They didn't have to worry about that. And that's what I felt walking in those doors, was I just get to be free, and I just get to, you know, like, this is my place.
Our political culture often rewards people who have credentials that are deemed valuable in white culture. So, you know, going to an Ivy League school, or just, you know, not talking about race if you're a Black politician. Do you think that we're starting to see a change in that dynamic in a way that's starting to reward political figures that embrace the diversity of who they are?
Absolutely, we are. I just believe that the fact that we can now have HBCU graduates who have obtained who have obtained at the highest levels of government. They are now emphasizing their educational roots. We've got a vice president and Kamala Harris who did not only talk about and emphasize her love for Howard University while she was out there campaigning, but now she talks about even then how her college education instilled in her the sense of pride and commitment to fight for justice. So we've got over 20 members of Congress now who owe their college degrees to an HBCU, some of whom will never let you forget where they got their education from, like me. Proud Aggie. I love Johnson C. Smith. I represent JCSU here in Charlotte. Yes, I'm fondly referred to as the godmother of HBCUs, and I just love them all. As our nation has gotten progressively more diverse, and as Congress is getting more diverse, I think it's impossible now to hide the impact of HBCUs on our society. We're getting much more notoriety now. People are saying, well, we've got a vice president. She didn't go to Harvard. She didn't go to Yale. Well, she didn't have to. She went to a greater place. She went to an HBCU.
HBCUs continue to play a relevant role because they are successful in their mission to provide an excellent education in a nurturing environment, an environment which Black students are encouraged to thrive and to develop networks, especially for first-generation students who are the first in their families to attend college. One of the amazing ways in which our HBCUs help is not just offering opportunities to get more Black people in higher education, but they are extremely effective at getting Black students into fields where we are otherwise underrepresented. HBCUs are the largest producers of Black doctors and scientists, graduate nearly 20% of Black students with undergraduate degrees, 40% of Black members of Congress, 40% of Black engineers, 50% of Black professors at non-HBCUs, 50% of Black lawyers, and 80% Black judges.
Wow.
So we have to continue and harness and invest in the role of HBCUs to help in our communities. This is a must.
It's not a coincidence that HBCU graduates on average tend to do better than Black graduates of predominantly white institutions when considering the indicators of social, financial, and physical well-being. Many of our students who face financial or academic difficulties say that they would typically be a professor or a counselor or somebody there who provided them with assistance so they can succeed. So this was certainly my experience at North Carolina A&T. Listen, you probably, at your school, they didn't use the term remedial, but when I got to A&T, they said, listen, we've made this investment in you. We believe in you. We're going to take you where we found you, and we're going to move you to where we know you can be. And that's what they did. And so I had to come in and take 2 remedial courses, got finished those, stayed on the honor roll. But it was the dedication of those educators and those at the school, the staff who helped to get me prepared. And they believed in my possibilities. Yeah. They saw something in me.
What we're seeing right now is people coming from HBCUs. We don't have to come from Ivy League colleges. We don't have to come from these PWIs. The diversity and the strength and the character building that comes out of HBCUs, that is what's changing the landscape right now. That is it, that integrity and that love of culture and that love of people. That is what HBCUs are producing right now.
Thanks for watching. If you're interested in learning more about HBCUs, I wrote an article about their history and cultural impact on crooked.com. We have a link in the description below where you can check it out.